have worked years to build our credibility, our reputation. This is our evidence, our ghost adventures.
I could go through all the events of the film that I documented and tell you how I could have debunked each, but that would be boring. And I don't expect this episode to be watched as much as the paranormal ones. So I'll just choose one. This one was the one I'd convinced myself must be paranormal back then. It was an EVP at Carrington House. When I discovered this in review, I didn't hear it at the time, but on reviewing the equipment, I was overjoyed. I promptly announced to the whole group reviewing all our material together that day that I'd found a Class A EVP. Everybody was celebrating. I told them what it said and they all agreed. To be sure, I decided to replay it at our general meeting we held each month. This meeting involved not just our group, but also any members of the public that wanted to come along. And I was ready for the rapturous acceptance, beyond doubt, that what I was going to present was irrefutable evidence of the paranormal. It was a female voice when there were only male investigators present. It contained clear words, and as far as I was concerned, there was no doubt. Just to be sure, I wanted to do it without bias, so I would not put the words on the screen that you saw. I wouldn't tell them what it said. I'd just let them listen and tell me what it said without prompting. Well, as the recorder and headphones were passed around from each person, they all said something different, each arguing and interpreting the sentence differently. I was devastated and realised at that moment we were doing things terribly wrong. So, was I a fool? Well, that's debatable. But I wasn't alone. There's been plenty of famous scientists who have been convinced by their confirmation biases. Kepler believed in the crystal spheres holding all the planets of our solar system in place. Newton dabbled in his love of alchemy. Science isn't meant to be perfect, but it improves its theories, always seeking better answers and never fearing to discard the nonsense along the way. So what was the voice? Well, what I knew and disregarded at the time was that there were female investigators on the investigation. True, they were not in the room, but they were at the investigation station, which was just outside the room. And the room itself, it had windows and a door leading into it where they were standing, meaning it was not sealed off by a solid wall. In any account, it certainly was a more plausible, simpler explanation. Or maybe it was a ghost. Can I prove that? Absolutely not. Well, our experiment was to be conducted at Harper's Mansion, a site we'd investigated twice before, and we'd gotten more EVPs there than anywhere else. Conversations with the same voice indicated it was what ghost hunters call a intelligent haunt, or one where the ghost is in direct communication, as opposed to a residual haunt, where they are just replaying sounds or appearances like a tape playing back, with no actual interaction with the people around them. Although we had no visuals here before, there was the lady in white, you know the one, and she'd been reported here by several tourists and psychics. You can watch my first video in this series if you want to catch up more on the place itself. Well, I had my own ideas on what I wanted to do, but I knew that we needed help. So first I approached by email, and then I actually met with the head of physics, the Associate Dean of Education, Professor Rodney Vickers, who was then working at the University of Wollongong. I fully expected to get thrown out of the place with him laughing at me all along the way. Instead, he was polite and looked at some of our evidence, in particular the apparition photo, and he made some suggestions. He even suggested using a spectrograph to examine the light source if we could capture it again. Of course, we couldn't afford that level of equipment, and also I didn't have the heart to tell him, like all of our ghost hunting, these things are usually just one-offs. Later, he would reply back to me and he would give me some feedback on how to improve our representation of the data we collect. It did lay out a problem we all face, though, when we ghost hunt. Anomalies don't make scientific facts. This was pointed out to me by my next contact in the USA, Ben Radford. Ben was the only professional ghost hunter I'd ever heard of at the time. Why professional? Well, he was paid to seek out the paranormal and to find reasons behind reported sightings and seek explanations. It was his job, not for TV or for clicks and likes and entertainment, but from his employer as deputy editor of the Skeptical Inquirer at the time. Ben had always been a skeptic and had been on, well, just about everything at this stage. And he's also written extensively on the subject of the paranormal and things like cryptozoology, UFOs, etc. I was again so lucky to have his help in 2014. I'd sent him an email proposing that we were about to conduct a year-long experiment and wanted his input on my ideas and any suggestions he had. Again, surprisingly, he was more than willing to help. You know, here I have to stop and just point out a big difference I'd seen from the science community as opposed to the pseudoscience community. Whereas we'd been met with opposition, jealousy, even downright hostility during our ghost hunting around groups who would stake their claim to certain properties or even towns. These were places you were not allowed to investigate, as the local group claimed exclusive rights. And if we wanted to do investigating, we had to go through them. Of course, it was all based on money. They were conducting ghost tours and they wanted no one else, even for a night, to encroach on their territory. My experience with the scientific community was always the opposite. They were open and inquiring. We and those we approached were always seeking answers, not just profits. Well, Ben wished me good luck, and I said I would send him the results as we progressed. Well, for those of you who are seeking real answers to the question, do ghosts exist? The next section will be of great interest to you. I even hope that maybe you will try and adopt some of the techniques and equipment for your own investigations, and certainly to add your own ideas. You can feel free to DM me or by email at the website here. If, however, like one person we had back in the day who joined our group for free, used our equipment for free, got driven to the investigation for free, said on her own investigation, "This is boring. I came for ghosts. Where's the ghosts?" Then you probably might want to skip the next section and go straight to the next video. This was the hardest, the most expensive, and probably the most difficult decisions we had to make when running this experiment. What equipment would provide reliable proof to the scientific community? EMF was out. I compared using EMF meters to find ghosts to using a toaster. Now you might say that's stupid. The numbers in the toaster regulate how long the bread needs to be toasted for. Once the timer is finished, the toast pops out of the toaster. You could do an experiment yourself and find out that 1 equals 1 minute, time it out that 2 equals 2 minutes. Normal readings, like those you would get with an EMF meter when you have explainable results. But what if it's 5 seconds off? What if it's 10 seconds off? 30 seconds? Stephen, is that you? Evan, are you a demon? You can't find the source of the discrepancy. It must be a ghost, right? Now all I need is just some way to make this light up. It's not actually a timer, but I'm going to bore you with talk of capacitors here. Most people assume that it does this and they dial it in for the toast they like. EMF meters are not designed to find ghosts any more than toasters are. No ghost hunter knows what the precise electromagnetic frequency of a ghost is, any more than they know what the live electrical current is when they're using a toaster. It just pops up. The EMF meter just moves the needle, or maybe it lights up. At best, you're making a guess, or toast.
Nice.
There are some things, though, that are easily measurable, and they're always reliable, that science uses for its designed purpose. Temperature, air pressure, humidity, light and sound, air currents are all examples of things that occur in nature that can be all measured accurately, predictably, and pretty easily these days by anyone wanting to experiment. Science would recognise and be curious about any sudden, unexplained changes in these natural circumstances that were not explainable under controlled circumstances. Things that ghost hunters always talk about doing but rarely do. Therefore, to eliminate these anomalies and creating a meaningful experiment, our hypothesis became you'll notice there is nothing here about ghosts. But if these changes not only occur without explanation, but with actual increases in responses to our requests, then we figured that would require further legitimate study, as they provided real proof using the very instruments that science uses to test these natural phenomena. For example, when we're talking about recording sound, most ghost hunters reach for the trusty voice recorder. But does that do a good enough job? Does this identify where the sound is actually coming from? How do you identify if the sound isn't coming from the recorder itself? Can you measure the so-called EVP in terms of sound? Well, the answer in all cases is yes. Instead of using just one recorder, either static or handheld, we used another 6 static recorders to identify the direction or even the source of sounds. Our ghost recorder was at the center, while others were placed about 10 feet away, north, south, east and west. You'll also note, because it was a 2-story building, we had another recorder downstairs directly beneath the central recorder and another outdoors. The central recorder was where we asked all activity to occur from any spirits every night during a preamble before running the experiment. The experiment was conducted at the same time every night, and the instructions were always the same. Any sounds were checked against the other recorders to see if this was just a noise coming from another part of the house and not a ghost speaking directly into the main recorder that we'd asked it to. This was a common claim by ghost hunters. They would say it's scientific proof because on one investigator's recorder was the ghost, but on the other one there was nothing. If it was on multiple recorders, it would be dismissed as not being spoken into our ghost recorder as requested. You'll also notice an instrument on top of the central recorder. This is a decibel meter. Sound is measured in decibels. This was not just a way to record the sound levels in the building, but also would provide proof if a ghost spoke into the central recorder, and that it wasn't just the recorder itself leaving sound artifacts on the recordings. You can see from the graph the peaks where we ask the same set of 10 questions every night. The troughs are the room's base sound level with no interference present. Although when you look at this, it's condensed for viewing. The software allowed individual questions and possible answers to be analysed in detail between each peak and trough. The first set of questions was always about the past. The second was about now, the present. And the final set was about the future. Who knows what a ghost knows, right? My favourite question about the future was if the ghost could tell me the Powerball numbers for next week. We did this on a tape loop. These days it would be much easier to do it on an iPhone. Once the investigators were present and seated to observe and record any changes we heard with our own ears, these were mainly trying to note down our own noises, our own bodily noises. And the second time we left the building completely to run the tape loop to remove any further possible contamination from us. Here, the tool of choice for ghost hunters is the trusty camera, camcorder, whatever you have. Ours had night vision. Why night? I've never understood. If a ghost appears during the day, then you would investigate during the day, right? Night vision is obviously scarier, even blurrier. I guess you could say things like ghosts appear in infrared more than visible light. But you still don't need the lights off for that. We use night vision because that's what ghost hunters do, and we wanted to replicate things as closely as we could. I will add, however, that all the lights were on as well. Light is measured in lux. We used a lux meter to record a live recording of the readings every second during all sessions. It was placed next to the central recorder and pointing at where the lady in white was said to appear. We also set up a shadow detector in front of the lux meter to detect any movement where it would sound an alarm if the infrared beam was broken, and presumably confirm any changes in the light recorded. In addition, we had 2 geophones or simple seismic detectors to pick up any ground movement if the ghost has the ability to create that movement on the ground. You know, the footsteps that are often reported. Our camcorders were placed filming the area as well. One filming the investigators who were seated observing the session, and in addition we had 2 motion activated cameras both upstairs and downstairs for other angles. Data loggers like this one was used both upstairs and downstairs, and also outside for our control. These not only gave us accurate readings of the environmental factors, but they could also verify ghost hunters' reports of suddenly feeling hot and cold in real time. So during the next 12 months, we ran our control and then our experiment and the final write-up of our results. For the first time, we got answers. Clear, definitive, conclusive answers to the things that I'd been searching for, well, over 4 years.